us rizq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us the blessing of the Prophet ﷺ. He sent us the blessing of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us so many blessings that we can never count them, enumerate them, or we can never be grateful enough for them. One of the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us is supplication. And the supplications of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Supplications that if we examine them, we would understand deeply about the deen and our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the words that the Prophet ﷺ said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's narrated for us to say. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُا الزَّكَاةَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, as for those who believe and they do righteous works and they establish the prayer, وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَوُا الزَّكَاةَ لَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ, that their reward is with their Lord. Meaning that when in the Rabbihim, their reward is with their Lord, meaning that we don't know how much reward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give to them. It will be great that we don't know, but it will be significant. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ, and there is no fear upon them, nor will they despair. No fear will come upon them, nor will they despair. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, as in other ayahs, about belief and the connection of belief with doing righteous works. And two of the righteous works that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions is included in this ayah as well as other, the establishment of salah and the giving of charity, of zakat, giving of charity. And in places of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the giving of charity, the giving of charity, and the importance of that. In dua, the Prophet ﷺ has given us a dua, has narrated, there's a narration of a dua, of a supplication, that if we examine it, we'd understand something about what the Prophet ﷺ is trying to tell us about charity and how to internalize charity, how to internalize it. The Prophet ﷺ, this narration is from Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu, he says that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he says, Allahumma inni as'aluka fi'l al-khayrat wa tark al-munkarat. That the Prophet ﷺ, he made dua, supplication, he says, Oh Allah, Allahumma inni as'aluka fi'l al-khayrat. Oh Allah, I ask you to allow me or to help me to do all good, to do all things that are good. وَتَرَكَ الْمُنْكَرَاتِ, and to help me to disavow or to leave all things that are wrong, that are indecent. That it encompasses everything. Asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you do fi'l al-khayrat, to do all things that are good, encompasses everything. Encompasses everything. And the leaving of munkarat and the leaving of wrongfulness, of sin, of indecency, encompasses everything. Then the Prophet ﷺ says, وَحُبُّ الْمَسَاقِينَ. Then the Prophet ﷺ, what does he say? And I ask you for love of the poor. To love the masakeen, the poor, the ones who don't have anything, the needy. To love the needy. وَأَن تَغْفِرْ لِي وَتَرْحَمَّنِي. And I ask you to forgive me and to have mercy upon me. وَإِذَا أَرَدْتَ فِتْنَةَ قَوْمٍ فَتَوَفَّنِي غَيْرَ مَفْتُونٍ. And if you, O Allah, if you want to send a trial upon these people, upon people, then cause me to leave from them so that I'm not affected. And then the Prophet ﷺ says, أَسْأَلُكَ حُبَّكَ وَحُبَّكَ مَنْ يُحِبُّكَ وَحُبَّ عَمَلًا يُقَرِّبُ إِلَىٰ حُبِّكَ. At the end of this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, of this supplication, the Prophet ﷺ said that I ask you for your love. أَسْأَلُكَ الْحُبَّكَ. I ask you for your love. And I ask you for the love of those who love you. I ask you for the love of those who love you. And the love of actions, of deeds that will draw me closer to your love. Help me to love the deeds, and if you love the deeds that draws you closer to Allah's love, then you will perform them. But let's concentrate on وَحُبَّ مَسَاكِينَ. In the Quran, in the verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to give. He tells us to give. And He tells us of those who are believers and they perform good deeds, then let them establish the prayer and let them give in charity. But in this dua, the Prophet ﷺ, in this supplication, the Prophet ﷺ is not asking Allah to have the ability to give. He doesn't ask Allah, help me to give. The Prophet ﷺ asked Allah, I ask you for me to love the poor. I ask you for me to love the needy. حُبَّ مَسَاكِينَ. Give me the love of them. Why? Why? When you love something, all the people that we love, all the things that we love, there's benefit that comes back to us, isn't there? We love our children, we love our spouse, we love our relatives, we love our parents because they have blood, because they did something for us. Your children love you because you are their parents, you give to them, you support them, you take care of them, and so on. A parent loves their children because they bring them into the world and it's part of them. So they're loving part of them. You love brothers and sisters because you're surrounded by them and there's something you love of them. They may like the things that you like. They may do the things that you like. They may help you in certain ways. Or there's characteristics that you like or traits that you like. And a bond is developed and love develops out of it. There's something tangible there. You enjoy their company. And by enjoying their company and you love to be around them. Love is developed. So there's tangible aspects of love. What do you get from loving the needy or the poor? What do you get? Nothing. There's nothing that you get. So when the Prophet ﷺ, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali says, when the Prophet ﷺ makes this dua, when he's telling you to make this supplication, to hubbul masaqeen, that love of the needy and the poor is premised on what? Love of Allah. You're going to love them because you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're going to love them for the sake of Allah. You're loving them for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that what happens? What happens when you love someone? You love your children. When you love your children, if they're in proximity to you, or whether they're far away from you, does your love decrease? It doesn't decrease. When you love your children, whether you speak to them every day or you speak to them once a month, does your love diminish from them? It doesn't diminish. It doesn't diminish. So they may be out of sight, but they're not out of mind. They say here, when out of sight, out of mind, except when you have love. When you have love, they may be out of sight, but they're not out of mind, because you maintain that love. So when the Prophet ﷺ asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Hubba masaqeen, what is he saying? That you're going to continue to give and to take care of the poor and the needy. You're going to continue along the path of helping them and of finding out about them, even if they're not in your sight. Even if they're not in your sight. Even if there's no pamphlet that tells you there's poor in this world. Even if there's no charity that comes knocking on your door to give. You will find out if there's poor because you love them. The Prophet ﷺ encouraged all his companions to love the poor. Abu Dhar radiallahu anhu, what does he say, Abu Dhar radiallahu anhu? He said the Prophet ﷺ advised them to love the poor and the needy. To love the poor and the needy and to get close to them. Abu Dhar said this, that the Prophet ﷺ told him to do this, advised him to do this. Advised him. Aisha radiallahu anha, mother of the believers, she says that the Prophet ﷺ told her, love the poor and get close to them. Love the poor and get close to them. Because Allah through it will draw nearer to you on the day of judgment. When you love them. Because when you establish love, then you care, and then you can see, then you can take care of them. Then you can really take care of them. And it drives you to take care of them. Like Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he was the Khalifa, they had in the Bayt al-Mal, in their storage of zakat and of sadaqah, they had so much that he used to go out at nights. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he used to go out at nights to find the poor or to discover how they were doing. And he used to send messengers out. He used to send messengers out to all parts of the Muslim areas and world to find out if there's poor and if they need anything. To take care of them. That is from what? Hubb masaqeen. It is from hubb, it is from the hubb, the love that you have for the needy and the poor. Because if you have it, then you don't need to be convinced to give. You don't need people to come and pamphlet you. You don't need to see pictures of poor and destitute people in order to stir an emotion to give. You don't need the marketing tools of marketers. You don't need it. You don't need websites. You don't need any of this. Hubb masaqeen, when you have it, when you have love for the poor and the needy, you are the ones who they're never out of mind. They're never out of your mind. Whether they're on the first page of a newspaper or not, whether people are aware of them or not, you know that they exist. And you go and you find them to give to them. You go, not in a special month, not in the barakah month, not in this month, not in this week, not at this night. But you are constantly trying to help them, to alleviate their poverty or to alleviate their difficulty. That's what drives it when you love something. When you love the poor. And so we have gone down the path where we have to be stimulated in order to give to the poor. We have to be. That's the path that we've gone down. We have to be marketed to in order to give the poor. We have to be shown pictures of starving poor children in order to give. Don't we? We have to be convinced by people to give. We have to hear ayahs of Quran and stories and hadith in order to give. We have to be convinced. A person who has this, Hubb masaqeen, premised on the love and for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doesn't need any of that. Not a single thing. They don't need it. They don't need it. They will search and they will find the poor to give. And they will give until they're exhausted. They will give until they're exhausted. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ made this dua. Well, this is perhaps why he made this dua. And this is why he advised his companions to love the poor and the needy. To love them. There's nothing coming back to them by loving them. It's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when we make du'as are powerful. The du'as of the Prophet ﷺ are powerful. Understanding them is where the power lies. Not just repeating it. Not just saying them, but understanding what is the concept that the Prophet ﷺ is giving us here. What is he trying to give to us? There's deeper meanings to the words of the Prophet ﷺ, as there is in the Quran by the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there's deeper meanings. And we have to develop a way to understand those deeper meanings. We have to develop a way to understand it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to be the ones who, when they speak and they ask Allah, that we actually are then reflective of what we're asking. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to truly love when we make this dua. Allahumma inni as'aluka fi'l al-khayrat wa tark al-munkarat wa hubb al-masaqeen. That when we say it, that we actually want Allah to imbue us with that trait. With that trait. Because if that trait is within you, then you will constantly be giving to the poor and to the needy. Constantly. You will not have to be convinced. You will give. And your hands will always be trained in that way. Always. It will always be trained in that way. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to achieve. May Allah help us to attain it. May Allah help us and guide us and forgive us. Have mercy upon us. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم وسائر المسلمين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتاب العزيز إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد صلاة وسلاما دائمين متلازمين يوم الدين. اللهم انصر إسلام المسلمين. اللهم انصر إخواننا في كل مكان يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر إخواننا في كل مكان يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصرهم نصرا مبينا قريبا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم يا رب العالمين يا أكرم الأكرمين. اللهم يحفظ أولادهم ونساءهم يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر لهم وارحمهم يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر أمواتهم يا رب العالمين وأمواتنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم اشفينا واشف مرضاة المسلمين يا رب العالمين يا أكرم الأكرمين. اللهم إنا نسألك توبات الكاملة مغفرة الشامل محبة الجامعة. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وأقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا